Hello, welcome to Dissident Canada. My name is Tyler. I am recording this the Friday before this comes out, several days in advance because I A, have the time, B, what I'm going to talk about isn't time sensitive, so to speak. Um, a topic of today's video is, you know, a, the more I learn and look into just global finance in general and global macroeconomics, the more I come to the conclusion that some sort of economic nationalistic framework or national capitalism, however you want to put it, is one going to become extremely freaking popular in, say, like the next decade plus, and also is probably necessary. Um, like for a multitude of reasons. One is like especially with multinational corporations, all right? But large corporations as well, and even smaller corporations, uh, regardless of where they are in the West, they have a view on capitalism that is warped, that is more in line with leftist ideology than not. It's very much a I will create wealth for this company, and from the owner's perspective myself, by extracting wealth from the lower down the chain. And you keep getting this concentration of wealth into the top 1%. Now this is a consistent thing that happens, all right? Doesn't matter economic model. Wealth gets centered towards the top. Um, it's fascinating that it works that way, but it does. And it always creates this political churn at a certain point that is undesirable, to say the least. You don't want to have consistent French revolutions. You don't want to be in the position where you do Russian revolutions and, like a myriad of other revolutions that happen due to, when you boil it down to, economic problems due to political solutions. And if you get back to like global finance just hollows out the middle class the way it's completely set up right now. Like the euro dollar system, the way it works with using excuse me, with debt financing and using government debt as collateral, it just creates like the largest wealth siphon there is from the lower, economic rungs on the ladder. And if you look, say, specifically at America, who had a history of doing this prior to, I would say, the more modern era. So, like, let's say before the 1920s. The American middle and lower class were not, didn't have as much stuff as they did now, but they were more resilient when it came to tough times. When times got tough, you didn't have, what you have now. If you look at what, say, happened to a large percentage of working men in 2008 and 9, they kind of off themselves because they just lost all hope. And you can see that if you look into labor statistics, productivity, people just have no hope for the future. So I think why an economic nationalism or a national capitalistic framework works is because, well, one, like 100% free markets are just horrible, awful things. You can see that. It will tend towards slavery over a long enough time. Um, and the objective of good governance, all right, is to protect your people, to, enshrine rights and freedoms and all that. Yeah, that's true. But also make sure they have, like, hope for the future. Which is, again, one of the reasons why Donald Trump is so successful as a politician. He's one of the few politicians who understand that hope is a massive energizing factor, especially in this time period where you get so little of it from the structures that are there to protect, the people's dream, the collective dream. I know that's a little collective. It sounds a little collectivist ideology, but it's not really, because if you say break down what most people want to the lowest common denominator, they typically want to have a decent lifestyle. Maybe not. They may want rich, but they really just want, economic security. They want shelter. They want food security. They want to feel safe enough to have a family. You can really see that last one when you look at data that asks young men and women why they are not having children. They want all that shit so that they feel secure enough to have a family, so they don't have, go into massive amounts of debt or have economic hardship with children. And you're not in a position where survival means you need to have a lot of kids. So if you look at when the vast majority of the population was some form of, agricultural subsistence living, or, trades were passed down and run by a family, you needed to have a family to survive. So you don't need that so much today, especially with the state stepping in. So, like, my idea of a framework is very much what I have repeatedly said with Donald Trump and the tariffs. You need to have a carrot and a stick. You have to reward companies for setting up shop in the country. You need to protect them, especially if they are indigenous companies. So, to a certain degree, you have to protect them. You don't have to bend over backwards, like, say, let's look at, say, Bombardier in Quebec is a shit company that should not have any of the protections or any of the government contracts it has, because they are 100% shit. But, like, if you go back to, say, 70s, 80s, and you look at Canadian car companies, you could have done some mild protectionism for them, and you could have come up with a stick method to ensure that there were Canadian car companies to come forward. They were incentivized to exist and given the room to innovate. Like, you can't give them so much of, say, some type of subsidy that they don't have to innovate. Like, you want to give them a little bit of a push there, but you do also want to protect them from foreign companies and competition to a certain extent. It's a very delicate balance, and the reason you want to do that is because you want your country to be fairly robust economically. So if you look at Russia is very, very much an insulated power in the terms of its economic standing, because it's gotten almost all of its energy production, if not all of its energy production, is domestic. Its food production is domestic. It has just enough industry to survive. Yes, there's a lot of things wrong with the Russian economy and a lot of parasitic elements. And if you were to minimize or reduce them to a large extent, you would see a massive boom in economic activity in Russia. But it seems the Russian people aren't 100% on board with that. And that's their choice. But uh, getting at, like, look at all the sanctions that Russia's been under. Now, a lot of them are half-assed, but you've got like 19 or 20 EU sanction packages, and Russia's economy is still chugging along. Like, it's not something fabulous and brilliant. It is, you know, pre 2008 good, I would say. Not, and when you compare that to post 2008, it looks fucking brilliant because post 2008 global economy is not very fucking good. Um, and Russia and Putin and his oh god, what's it called? It's the Ministry of, is it Economic Development, something like that, have done a reasonable job. Now, you again, there's a lot of grift, waste, corruption that is involved. If you got rid of it, it would be better. So, like, my theory, right, and this is partially coming from, like, thinking of, well, what could you do with Canada? Because Canada really needs to get its economic gear in shift that from 1 or 2, into the 5th or 6th gear if we have it. So my thought process would be, okay, you simplify tax code, all right? You remove income tax and you remove derivatives of income tax. What do I mean by that? I mostly mean payroll tax, all right? You simplify the tax structure so that you have, say, corporate taxes would be probably your biggest. You get that in line of the Goldilocks zone, which the Goldilocks zone is the highest range for return that you can get percentage-wise. So taxes are a bell curve where at 0% you get no revenue, and at 100% you get no revenue. But there is a bell shape where somewhere in there is the peak. And if I think you hit the lower range of that Goldilocks zone, just because you probably want it to be lower, less economic effect. All right. And that is the corporate tax rate. And for companies that are started natively in Canada, that is their tax rate. For multinational corporations that put a headquarters in Canada, they get a small punishment. They get, say, maybe a 5% increase on their on top of that corporate tax rate. All right, that's just to protect the Canadian market, all right, and the local Canadian economy, because as long as that's robust, you can more or less deal with global fluctuations in the financial economy. For companies that do not wish to have a headquarters in Canada, they can still sell here, but you hit them with a 10 to 15% tax rate on all revenue. So, like, you give them a fairly deep punishment. So not only are they paying, what's the corporate tax rate, Goldilocks zone? I think it's 10 to 15%. So they end up paying, like a 25% at the high end revenue tax rate. Like, that's not on profit, that's on pure revenue. So you're taking a quarter of what they pull in your country. So it incentivizes them to bring headquarters here, which is more jobs and blah, blah, blah. And again, you make a more robust economy. You give an incentive to start a company in this country where it's like, oh, you're only getting the lowest end. You're getting that 5% tax rate. All right? Which is again good. And you could make it a progressive tax rate. I think you cap at a quarter though. Maybe 30% Um, you'd have to adjust it to see how it works out in practice. And the other thing is I would have like a federal sales tax of like 1 to maybe 2%. Maybe. That would allow the federal government to correctly be able to function at their job of, making it very enticing to trade with countries, and friendly relationships. You need all that, and do defense. Like, that's basically the federal government's job, and to kind of be a neutral arbitrator between the provinces. Like, that's generally the idea of the federal government. But you completely outlaw income tax. You do not let the provinces have their own income tax. You keep them very much in check. They can have other types of taxes. I would also remove property taxes for Canadians. I would have property taxes for non-Canadians, and I would have them quite high. Again, it it protects the market for Canadians. You're not going to have an overinflated, or you're less likely to have an overinflated housing market, because you don't have to deal with foreign investors coming in being like, well, this market isn't really producing houses, but you're seeing massive amounts of population growth due to, say, immigration. We can make money not only on financing now, on buying large amounts of property, but we can also then make a shit ton on monthly payments. And as time goes on, when we refi, because we'll have so much equity by then in these properties, we'll get money back, which will allow us to then use that money to finance new deals. That's a massive problem. Like, I wouldn't outright ban foreign ownership of property. I would just profit the ever living fuck from it, because that's a great fucking deal. Again, you are protecting Canadians from foreign parasitic, really global finance assholes. Is what they are. Which is, obviously, you need to do that. Like, at some point, someone's going to come to a similar conclusion, but they'll most likely be more extreme than I am. You want foreign capital in your country, because you don't want to just generate it all yourself. You want a little bit of the foreign capital coming in. That is how you have a more robust, healthy economy. Like, you definitely don't want to be 100%. Like, if you could be 100% independent, which in this day and age you really can't. But like, you can get, say, 60 to 80% of the way there. And then when you have market conditions outside of Canada drop, you've got resiliency there to pick up the slack. And it's not going to be as devastating as it could be. I would also be hella heavy regulations when it comes to the importing of foreign workers and immigration in general. I would very much have it biased towards people who want to be here, and in doing so, they have a high degree of knowledge of Canadian. How would you put it? Like you would say cultural norms, but I think standards and practices is kind of a better way to apply it. All the little courteous things that Canadians just kind of grow up knowing how to do because their parents teach them. Um, like you probably all know the hand signals for when you're in a car, the flashing of your lights to warn drivers of, hey, there's cops up ahead. You might want to take appropriate action. You know, holding doors open, uh, the overly polite, no, please go ahead, after you type stuff that goes on in Canada, which I really haven't seen in over a decade. Um, which is kind of sad. Those hilarious moments of where you can see it happening at, say, like a mall or something, where two dudes are trying to go opposite directions, but they're in the same walking type lane, and they each go, no, after you, sir, no, after you. You know, those kind of interactions. um, I really miss them now that I think about it. Like, they were kind of funny, but they were funny in the way of, these guys are really just trying to be the most polite in the room, and show one up. They may or may not mean it, but like that's really what it is. No, 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 sir, you go first. No, 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 after you. Um, I do miss those encounters, not just having them because they were kind of fun, but like watching them happen in the wild was also just that little reminder of Canadianism that you kind of want back nowadays when it's mostly gone. Um, yeah, like I don't know how any of you feel about this, but the more I look into this, globalization and the opening of markets, it just has really backfired. It's benefited like companies who get like a mercantilist monopoly, very, very much so. You can think of like Foxconn has a monopoly on making Apple products for a multitude of reasons. Um, TSMC has a monopoly on chip manufacturing. Um, oh god, here in Canada, I'm trying to think. Um, I mean, Canadian Tire kind of has like accidentally ended up in this monopoly of like a pseudo, not exactly a Walmart, but not a Home Depot either. Somewhere in between, it's got this, like, you could go to Home Hardware, but you're not gonna get all the kind of stuff that you can at Canadian Tire, even though Canadian Tire has been crappy tire for I can't even remember how long. I will say it is most likely the day they stopped handing out Canadian Tire dollar money. That shit was hilarious. How they never got busted with printing their own currency, I have no idea. Cause that's what it was. But it was a unique Canadian thing. Like, imagine going into the States, all right? And like, I guess the equivalent would be kind of like a Maynard's or something, if I'm getting that correct. Or I guess like a Myers grocery store. It's not a direct equivalent. And they just issue, like, you spend $100 and you get a 10 cent or maybe 20 cent, maybe even $1, uh, back in currency that is only redeemable at Myers. Like, that takes balls to do. And it was kind of like, I don't think any other country had something that crazy. Like, back when Canadian Tire was doing that, you would go out, into the world, you'd go abroad, and Canadians would screw with people in other countries, being like, no, this Canadian Tire money is Canada's money. And it's like I remember going to Cuba and the Cuban guide being like, no, Canadian Tire money is not redeemable here. And, everybody laughing. He had a great joke about it that I cannot, for the life of me, remember. I just remember everybody on the bus laughing. Like that used to happen. And again, a uniquely Canadian thing that no longer happens. Fucking pisses me off. Anyways, like, I'd love to see the Conservative Party of Canada, or even the PPC, like, start pushing this like a general framework of economic nationalism, of balancing protectionism versus the stick. Like, if you want to see it go too far into protectionism, you can just look at supply management, or in the United States, the dairy industry basically lives on a lifeline because the United States federal government buys a metric shit ton of milk and converts it into cheese so that it can be stored, and the only place they have to store it is in these massive salt caverns that are just filled with cheese wheels, and it's just there. I think they should start selling it. Make all different varieties of cheese and just start selling it across the world and be like, yeah, this is America brand American cheese. This one's got a little bit of garlic flavor in it or whatever. I think that would be hilarious. You could use cheese to pay off the debt. There's probably that much cheese in those cheese vaults. Like, it's insanely a lot. Excuse me there. Anyways, that's the video for today. Until the next video, have a good day. I hope you had a great weekend, and that Monday didn't suck as hard as Mondays sometimes do.